For years, Pirate Software built his brand on the illusion that he was the smartest person in the room. But in 2025, that entire image fell apart when he was exposed as one of the most toxic and dishonest individuals in the game development community.
The level of stupid that I just had to receive was like sitting on Twitter for 12 hours. This sucks. That's a really stupid move.
When Pirate Software told everyone that he worked on video games for 20 years, that he worked as a hacker, why did anyone believe him when this was what he was putting out? Why did it take this long for people to call him out for being a fraud when this is his magnum opus?
In the fallout, he lost more than 500,000 subscribers and almost 90% of his Twitch viewership in the span of a few short months. You'd think such a fall from grace would force anyone to step back and reflect on themselves, but Pirate Software seems to have learned nothing, because even in the big 2026, he still can't stay out of controversy and online outrage, all due to his massive ego, refusing to accept when he's wrong, and lying through his teeth to the whole world. Is the Pirate Software hate train running again? I'm so stoked. This guy is under-hated still. Hi, I'm the Internet Anarchist. I create weekly YouTube documentaries, and this is the self-inflicted downfall of Pirate Software. In this video, we're going to be breaking down how Pirate Software, aka Thor, cannot stop turning himself into an online lolcow. And by the end, you'll see why this latest desperate attempt to prove himself right might have finally destroyed what was left of his image. I have already made 2 videos covering the 2025 drama in detail, but here's a super quick recap of how everything spiraled out of control. The entire thing started in January 2025 during a World of Warcraft run, when Thor refused to help his teammates at a critical moment, causing them to die and lose months of progress. When the community called him out for the selfish play, he refused to take any accountability.
Wants me to sit down, grovel on my knees and be like, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Yamato. It was all my fault, the mage."
This ultimately led to him being kicked out from OnlyFans, a well-known World of Warcraft guild he was part of. While this controversy didn't do much damage to his image, it exposed Thor's inability to take criticism in a healthy way. A pattern, mind you, that would only get worse over time. By June 2025, he found himself in much hotter water, this time for his stance on the Stop Killing Games movement, a widely supported, community-driven effort to legally prevent publishers from shutting down games that players had already paid for. As one of the most influential voices in the gaming community, people expected Pirate Software to back the movement. But not only did he misunderstand the entire initiative, he used aggressive language to actively discourage it.
That is a horrible direction. That's awful, dude. Now, eat my entire... The level of stupid that I just had to receive was like sitting on Twitter for 12 hours. This sucks. That's a really stupid... That's an incredibly stupid move. I think this is complete garbage. All of this can eat that. I dropped the mask entirely. I have no qualms about that. They can eat the whole thing.
His viewers weren't happy seeing him trash something the entire internet considered fundamentally pro-consumer, and even major YouTubers like Charlie publicly called out Thor for his stance.
But there's irrefutable evidence that you had a detrimental effect, a majorly damaging effect on Stop Killing Games because of your misinformation that you spread about it in 2 videos and across all your streams, and not once have you bothered to correct that record.
As a result, Pirate Software started losing tens of thousands of subscribers every day. But once again, instead of admitting that he was wrong and apologizing, he doubled down, and even tried to play the victim by claiming his games were being review bombed, which predictably only made things worse. And before this controversy could even cool off, he took another massive hit to his reputation. Recently, a jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay millions for their role in designing and promoting addictive platforms. They knew their apps could contribute to anxiety, depression, and body image issues, but did not share those risks while prioritizing profits. The recent history verdict underscores the consequences of those decisions. If you or your child spent years growing up on social media and experienced serious mental health struggles, you should hear this. Morgan & Morgan is stepping up to hold these platforms accountable for the harm they caused. it. You can use my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to take a short quiz to see if you qualify for the case. With that being said, let's get right back into the video. In July 2025, a YouTuber named Coding Jesus released a video analyzing Thor's coding abilities.
Imagine removing all of these comments. Would you, as a newly added game developer to his game project, have any idea that one is Shelly? You would have no idea. This would never ever be allowed in a production repository. And like I've been hinting, it's below what you'd expect of a bottom tier intern.
For years, Thor had built his brand on expertise, claiming he'd worked as a hacker for the government and spent significant time at Blizzard, the legendary game studio. He leaned heavily on these credentials to establish authority in the community.
I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now.
So when Coding Jesus put that video out, it threatened to unravel that entire image. But rather than addressing the technical criticism head-on, Thor attacked Coding Jesus personally.
It's just another, YouTube grifter trying to fight for relevance, dude. That's all that shit is. All too common these days.
And deflected every time he was caught being objectively wrong.
Manually setting all to 0 with 8 lines. Those were set to 0 because it was ending the alarms. By setting them to 0, You're actually setting the alarm to off.
So what he's doing here is a classic example of deflection. He pretends the chatter asked, "Why do you set the alarms to 0?" instead of the question, which was, "Why don't you iterate over them in a for loop?" A for loop is a very basic coding construct. If you're iterating through a consecutive set of numbers, you definitely want to use that. It's the perfect scenario for a for loop.
Unsurprisingly, his reputation as an expert game developer collapsed almost overnight, and worked at Blizzard became a full-blown meme. But that was far from the deepest hole he'd dig for himself. On July 5th, an ex-user tweeted a screenshot of a conversation between Thor and his mod, Kronos, which revealed that they had allegedly faked his record-breaking Twitch hype train back in April 2024. By gifting subs and bits to himself. Both Thor and Kronos denied the allegation and acted as if they were the victims of unfair online hate. But days later, another person posted a screenshot of the exact donation in question and proved that Pirate Software was a shameless liar, completely shattering whatever trust his viewers still had in him. What ties all these controversies together is a single, consistent pattern. Thor's arrogance prevents him from ever admitting fault, even when he's clearly, demonstrably wrong, and at times he'll resort to outright lying to avoid it. Pirate had a golden ticket to being as big as the biggest influencers, but his ego was stroked too much to allow himself a little humility, and that was his biggest fault, letting it go to his head. As a result, he burned through nearly all of his credibility in just a few months, and for a creator whose entire brand was built on authenticity and expertise, losing that trust meant losing almost his entire audience. But if there was one silver lining for Pirate throughout this 2025 fallout, it's that the people who are watching him after everything are genuinely loyal fans who are clearly ready to support him through the worst of times. And with that kind of audience, he still had one last shot at redemption. Obviously, reaching back to his peak was nearly impossible, but he could slowly rebuild momentum, provided he course-corrected and proved he was capable of growth. But if his recent behavior is anything to go by, it looks like he would rather sabotage his own comeback than swallow his pride. After the hype train scandal blew up in July, Thor stayed relatively low for a few months, until he decided to make a big comeback in December 2025, with a month-long event called Indiecember.
For the entire month of December, we're going to be doing an event. We're going to be calling it the Indiecember Games Show. One of the things that I've seen with traditional game shows is they're usually quite short. It's usually just a day or a couple of hours. Those games don't get a lot of breathing room. It's usually just an ad that plays. So since I'm doing it over the entire month, we're going to be playing those games on stream. We're going to be talking to developers. We're going to be interacting with those communities. We're going to be really doing deep dives on every one of these.
He presented the event as an initiative designed to spotlight indie developers and showcase smaller games that normally wouldn't get mainstream attention.
I've also seen inside of the indie scene that money ends up being an issue for everybody. It's incredibly expensive for the indie shows to be able to show off their games, and it ends up being a huge barrier for them to be able to do this. So I'm doing it for free. We've got corporate sponsors, we've got some other types of sponsors that are in there, and we've got you guys as the viewers, so the indies aren't going to pay a dime. That's the whole point with this.
Maybe this was his attempt to re-establish himself as an influential figure in the space, after months of public humiliation. And to be fair, a lot of his audience responded positively. Sounds like an awesome way to support indie games. So happy you're doing this. But once the event actually kicked off, it became clear who it was really for. Some industry observers pointed out that the event structure benefited Thor far more than the developers he claimed to be uplifting. There was no dedicated website, no centralized hub, developers had to reach out to Thor directly just to participate, and he hadn't taken any real steps to ensure these games would gain sustained exposure beyond his own stream. Now, did the event bring some new eyes to those developers? Probably, but the spotlight stayed almost entirely on his platform, and if you look at the numbers, there was actually a small bump in his viewership during that month. This criticism never escalated into a full-blown scandal, but it once again revealed the same pattern. Even when positioning himself as a champion for others, Thor has a habit of shaping the narrative so that he remains at the center of it, and that exact ego that needs to always be the smartest, the most important person in the room is what sparked his most recent controversy, one that might just be the final nail in the coffin. For years, Ashes of Creation had been marketed as the next great evolution in the MMO space. It raised over $3.2 million in crowdfunding, built a passionate community of nearly 20,000 backers, and asked players to believe in it for close to a decade. Then, on February 1st, 2026, without warning, Intrepid Studios announced that it was shutting down development and laying off the entire development team. As you can imagine, the backlash was immediate, and a significant chunk of that anger landed straight on Pirate Software, because if you've watched Thor for any length of time over the past few years, you know he has been one of the loudest voices backing the project. But just 4 days before the official shutdown, he quietly stopped backing the game, and when Intrepid made the announcement public, Thor posted a lengthy tweet claiming he wasn't surprised the project failed, which to a lot of people felt incredibly two-faced. How could you have been connected to this game for 5 years and not smelled the BS, when so many others warned to stay away? Pirate Software peddles the game hard and managed to jump ship before it comes out as a scam game. I can't tell what Thor is full of more, himself or shit. The very next day, Thor uploaded a YouTube video addressing the situation. In it, he claimed that the real reason he distanced himself from Ashes of Creation was moderation issues. According to him, there were racist and hateful users infesting the community.
And I was sending them stuff back and forth with this, and I was like, hey, we got a serious moderation problem on the server. And we started linking them things. There was a guy that was actually posting comments about Jewish people every day, all day, right? He was just doing that every single day, all day. And the account would just change every single day. Guy never got banned. We had a guy that was saying that he wanted to form a group to go kill all the LGBT people on the server. We got a screenshot of that, sent it up to them. Guy never got banned.
He also showed a screenshot of a message from Margaret Crone, who was head of communications on the project.
What led me to quit the game was actually this response from Margaret, which I have right here.
Now, on the surface, what Thor said sounds completely reasonable, but this is Thor we're talking about, and by now, you should already know how this goes. Given his track record of twisting situations to make himself look like the only right person in the room, people weren't exactly inclined to take his word for it. Shortly after his video went live, Margaret went on social media and claimed that Thor had misrepresented the context of that message. This was not what that message was in reference to. It was in reference to someone calling him a ferret effer, and good shit, your Kiwi Farms page is booming. We actioned the account, but did not permanently ban the person. Those other folks saying super egregious things like saying they wanted to kill LGBT people, we were banning. And given Thor's history of lying, a large portion of the community sided with her immediately. So, in an attempt to prove himself right once and for all, Thor released screenshots of an extremely long text exchange between him and Margaret. But this move was about about to backfire in the worst way imaginable, because the texts didn't show what Thor wanted them to show, they showed the opposite. From the very start of the conversation, Thor wasn't reporting a racist user, he was reporting people who were making fun of him or referencing his Kiwi Farms page, and calling him names. That was what he wanted Intrepid to take action on, and when they didn't act fast enough, he texted Margaret again a week later, asking why the players he reported still hadn't been banned. Margaret explained that not every report leads to a permanent ban, stating, "Depending on the severity and context, some cases warrant warnings or temporary actions, which are not reflected on the public ban list." She also explained that their small support team was working through a massive backlog of reports, which was causing delays, but Thor seemed fixated on getting these viewers banned. According to him, they were connected to the 6 swatting incidents he had experienced over the past year. Now, to be clear, swatting is a completely unjustifiable form of cyber harassment that can put someone's life at serious risk. It is not something anyone should ever have to deal with. But as Margaret pointed out in her reply, it's also not something a video game moderation team has any control over beyond their own platform. We hear you, and we want to be very clear that we take concerns like this seriously. If at any point you feel that your personal safety is at risk, we strongly encourage you to contact local law enforcement immediately. We can and do take action within our platforms, but threats that extend beyond the game or into the real world are best handled by the appropriate authorities, which was a reasonable response. But not for Thor. You see, he's so used to banning everyone in his chat who criticizes or pokes fun at him, he expected the same instant treatment here. But when he couldn't get the situation handled exactly the way he wanted, he flipped out and sent a long, threatening message that he would stop playing and streaming the game. At this point, it would have been completely understandable if the person on the other side got irritated and simply stopped responding to him. But Margaret continued to be really polite, reading, "I can see how deeply disappointed you are, and I understand why this moment feels like a breaking point. We investigate the reports you and others submitted. The messages in question occurred within a very short window, roughly a 15-minute span, and involved only a handful of posts. While some of the language used was inappropriate and unacceptable, our current moderation framework does not always move directly to permanent bans for first-time offenses of this nature." She also explained that there was no way for her team to confirm whether the in-game users Thor reported were actually the same people responsible for swatting him, which to anyone with common sense should be obvious. As soon as Pirate released these conversations publicly, the entire community pointed out 2 things. Number 1, he had once again twisted the narrative to make himself look like he could never be wrong, and second, he came across as incredibly entitled and unwilling to even consider someone else's explanation. Naturally, this triggered another intense wave of backlash against him. Pirate being so deep in Delulu that he doesn't even realize he proves himself wrong, and a liar. Gotta be one of my favorite genres. Lol, Pirate claimed they said something completely different and worse. Once again, his drama is over nothing but his own actions. And now, with him once again turning himself into an online lolcow, it feels increasingly unlikely that the internet will ever take him seriously again. However, what makes this downfall story uniquely disappointing is that at every turning point, Pirate Software had a chance to stop the hate by simply admitting fault and showing humility, but every time he chose his ego instead. In trying to protect his pride, he slowly destroyed any realistic path to redemption, and this comment sums up the entire saga better than anyone else. It's hilarious how his rep went downhill so fast. If he could just shut up and admit his wrong once in a while, no one would have cared.